Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about something really interesting, a proposal to completely shake up how Texas picks its judges. And really, it gets at a huge question about what we even want from our justice system.
So let's start with this quote from Judge Kathy Stone. I mean, it really hits the nail on the head, right? This is the ideal we're all hoping for in a judge, someone who's impartial, neutral, and just focused on being fair. Their loyalty is supposed to be to the law, not to a political team.
But that leads us to this fundamental conflict, almost like a catch-22. How can you be that neutral arbiter when the entire path to get on the bench forces you to be intensely partisan? The system itself seems to be at odds with what we want the outcome to be. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, let's try to see the system from the inside out, from the perspective of someone who has actually lived it, Someone who went from being a campaign volunteer to a candidate and then finally a judge.
So the person who came up with the framework we're looking at saw it all firsthand. They realized that the pressure you're under when you run a partisan campaign, well, it doesn't just magically vanish after the election. It can create these perceptions that stick with you, following you right onto the bench, and, that can really erode public trust.
And this isn't just one person's story, right? This personal conflict is really a symptom of much bigger, systemic issues that are just baked into the way Texas currently elects its judges.
The source material really zeroes in on three big flaws here. First, there's what they call the fundraising trap. I mean, think about it. Judges have to ask for campaign money from the very same lawyers who will be arguing cases in front of them. Awkward, right? Then you've got voters who are just overwhelmed, so they take shortcuts and just vote based on party. And finally, the whole thing is so political that a lot of really qualified, smart attorneys just say no thanks and don't even bother running.
And to give you a sense of the scale of this, it's just mind-boggling. In a big county like Harris County, you could see something like 50 judicial races on one ballot. I mean, who can possibly research all of them? It's a massive information overload, and it's exactly why so many people end up just voting the party line. It's the only shortcut that makes sense. And you can see how this plays out in the real world. Back in 2020, a state commission looked at this. They actually agreed, just barely, that the current system has major problems. But when it came time to agree on a fix, complete deadlock. They couldn't even agree on something like merit selection. It just goes to show you how stuck this whole conversation is.
So, okay, if the old ways of doing things are stuck in a political traffic jam, where do we go from here? Well, this proposal suggests a totally different path. It's a hybrid model, taking bits and pieces from different ideas to try and build something new that might actually work. And we're not talking about a simple little tweak here. This is a whole four-part framework. Each part is meant to tackle one of those flaws we just talked about, and the idea is that they all work together, trying to strike that tricky balance between letting voters have their say and making sure judges can be independent. So let's look at the current situation. If you want to run for judge in Texas right now, you're signing up for an 18-month marathon. Seriously, the fundraising starts way back in May of one year for an election that's not until November of the next year. If you're already a judge, that means you're basically in permanent campaign mode.
What this new proposal does is chop that down by a full 7 months. It squeezes the whole thing into just one calendar year. The big benefit? It would let judges spend way more time, actually judging instead of constantly campaigning. Plus, it gets rid of those expensive runoff elections, which is a nice bonus.
Okay, so the next couple of parts of this plan rely on something called ranked choice voting, or RCV. It might sound complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. Instead of just picking one person, you rank your choices, first, second, third, and so on. If your top pick doesn't have enough votes to win, they're eliminated. But your vote isn't wasted. It just automatically shifts to your second choice. The goal is to make sure the winner has support from a really broad group of voters.
So picture this for the primary election. You get one ballot and every single candidate is on it. Democrat, Republican, Independent, everyone. You, the voter, get to rank them. Then, through that whole ranked choice process, the system figures out who the top 3 candidates are, and those 3 move on to the general election.
And hey, this isn't just some academic idea. The source points out that we've seen this work in the real world. In places like Alaska and New York, ranked choice voting has helped candidates win by actually reaching out beyond their own political base. It rewards people who can build coalitions and find common ground.
And that brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, performance retention. So you win that first competitive election to get the job. But after that, you keep the job based on how well you actually do it. At the end of your 6-year term, the voters just get a simple question, a yes or no on whether to keep you. It takes all the partisan campaign craziness out of the re-election process.
So this all sounds pretty innovative, right? But let's be realistic.
Changing an entire system like this is never a walk in the park. This hybrid model, it's got some really clear upsides, but there are also some massive hurdles to clear before it could ever become a reality.
On the plus side, you get a much smoother process, and counties would save a ton of money by getting rid of those runoffs. But on the flip side, you've got some big challenges. You'd need a massive campaign to teach voters how ranked choice voting even works, not to mention the initial cost of all the new voting technology.
And this is the real mountain to climb. None of this can happen without changing the Texas Constitution. And that means you need a 2/3 vote in both the Texas House and the Senate, and then it has to be approved by a majority of voters in a statewide election. I mean, that is an incredibly high bar to clear.
So when you strip away all the details, this entire debate really boils down to one fundamental question. What do we actually value most in our justice system?
And it really is a balancing act, a core tension. On one hand, we absolutely value voter control and having our officials be politically accountable. But on the other hand, we want our judges to be independent, to make decisions based on merit, without feeling any political heat. You could argue the current system leans heavily toward the first one. This proposal is really an attempt to find a better balance between the two. And that's really the question this whole thing leaves us with. The point of this proposal isn't to be the one perfect final answer. It's to kickstart a real conversation. How do we build a system that manages to honor both the democratic will of the people and the independence of the rule of law? And really, what comes next? Well, that's a conversation for all of us to have.